The new DC universe is in danger. Not because Superman didn't hit $1 billion or the Peacemaker finale split fans. Warner is merging with another company which will shake up DC Studios and maybe even end with James Gunn's run as CEO. If that sounds like an overreaction, just remember, Warner has changed hands twice in the last 7 years, and both times it wrecked the DCEU. Every new leadership brings new people, new ideas, and they usually scrap what came before. That's how we lost Henry Cavill's Superman and almost got Sasha Calle as his replacement. Let that sink in. So this is big. But to figure out how bad it really is, let's take a look at the 4 companies interested in buying Warner and what could happen to the DCU in each case. The first possible buyer is Netflix. They've got the money to buy Warner, and they interested in the company because of its IP, which includes Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and of course, all the DC characters. Plus, a merger between Netflix and HBO Max would make them the most powerful streaming service in the world. But this would be a really bad scenario. Wait, that's not the right word. It would be catastrophic for the DCU, because Netflix isn't into making movies for theaters, and their whole approach is the opposite of Gunn's. Their CEO, Ted Sarandos, recently said they're not interested in expanding into theaters because their business is all about streaming. Sure, they've relaxed a bit lately with Knives Out getting a theater release, and Glass Onion having a limited one, and the Stranger Things finale is gonna be shown both in theaters and on Netflix at the same time. But those are rare cases. If they buy Warner, forget about getting 1 or 2 DC movies in theaters each year. We'd go back to the slow pandemic pace, and I'm sure Netflix would do simultaneous releases in theaters and on streaming, just like Warner did in 2021. Say goodbye to getting a Superman sequel 2 years after the first one. We'd have to get used to mostly seeing shows with tiny little budgets.
That's bad, right?
And it gets worse. One of the best things about the new DCU is that Gunn said he'd personally go over every script for every project, and nothing would go into production unless he thought the script was good enough. But Netflix's way of doing things is more about pumping out a ton of content without stopping to check if it's actually good. For example, Gunn canceled Sergeant Rock and put The Authority on hold until he's satisfied with the script. But if a Netflix exec had been in charge, they probably would have made those movies anyway. Rushed and on the cheap, just to have more stuff on the platform. And the DCU's rep would have gone down the drain. And don't forget, Netflix is the one that started the annoying trend of dropping all episodes at once, which messed up the way we watch shows now. Take Peacemaker Season 2. It wouldn't have been nearly as fun if they dropped it all at once. What kept us hooked every week was wondering if they were actually on Earth X or not. The mystery, the fan theories, the hype on social media. None of that would have happened if we just binged it. And Netflix doesn't like making sequels or second seasons. Since their business model is all about getting new people to subscribe every month, it's cheaper for them to make a brand new show than to keep going with one that people have already watched. With a mindset like that, Peacemaker wouldn't have made it past its first few episodes. It started off with low ratings and only took off thanks to word of mouth. Same goes for a second season of Creature Commandos or a follow-up to Lanterns. Unless a show turns into a massive hit like Stranger Things or Cobra Kai, it's not making it past season 1.
This is not good!
If this merger happens, James Gunn won't stay in charge of the DCU. Either they'll want to replace him with someone who follows the Netflix method, or Gunn himself won't want to ruin his reputation by blindly taking orders and fronting for projects he knows aren't any good. But maybe you're thinking, well, that doesn't sound that bad. What if I didn't like Superman, or I'm not a fan of Gunn? Maybe you're hoping Netflix brings back the Snyderverse. During the Rebel Moon promo, Zack said he'd love to continue his story if Netflix got the rights. But that's never gonna happen. Zack's exclusive deal with Netflix ended after the huge Rebel Moon flop. Since pretty much no one liked the franchise, they shut that universe down. It doesn't look like they're planning to keep working with Snyder, because they didn't make their money back. No way are they spending $500 million to make 2 Justice League movies just to release them on streaming and not make a profit. But even and if the Netflix execs wanted to continue the Snyderverse just for the heck of it, they literally couldn't do it. They've lost all the actors from that universe. I doubt Cavill would wanna come back after how Warner treated him and trashed his image. Ben Affleck said a million times he's done with superhero movies. Ezra Miller is cancelled, Gal Gadot can't act, Ray Fisher burned bridges with pretty much everyone, and Jason Momoa wants to play Lobo now, not Aquaman. They'd have to recast the whole Justice League, and announcing another reboot would destroy the DC brand for good. They'd lose both the casual audience and the fans of the new universe. And we'd also lose Matt Reeves' Batman.
Oh no!
But don't worry, it gets better from here. The second possible buyer is Apple, which is the reverse Netflix. They have a super small catalog, but their projects are really nice and good. They've got Severance, Silo, Murderbot, For All Mankind, and Dark Matter. These might not be as big as Netflix hits, but if you randomly pick something on Apple TV, chances are it's gonna be high quality and look like it had a solid budget. That's because their approach is very similar to James Gunn's, or maybe even stricter. Merging with Warner wouldn't hurt their image, since HBO is also a stamp of quality, unlike Netflix or Disney+. Getting HBO's amazing catalog would give them the popularity boost they need, so buying Warner would be an absolute win for them. The good thing for the DCU is that shows like Peacemaker or Lanterns would fit under the Apple TV brand, since they meet their quality standards. They could also keep doing weekly episode drops, because that's already how most Apple TV shows are released. Plus, they wouldn't have any issue greenlighting shows that aren't pulling 5 million viewers, like an animated Mr. Miracle or an absolute Batman show. What matters to them is having a high-quality bar that attracts more subscribers, not just filling the library with random content. Also, Apple doesn't have Warner's infrastructure or executives with the experience or talent of James Gunn and Peter Safran, so chances are they leave the company mostly as is instead of replacing everyone. There might be a few layoffs for redundancy, but I doubt they want to restart the DCU with a brand new team. This is a way better scenario for DC, James Gunn, and cinema in general.
Thanks for the good news.
But not everything would stay the same. Big-name directors would finally want to work on the DCU. Warner still has a bad rep after all the drama with Legendary and Nolan, but Apple doesn't have that problem. They could attract major filmmakers and take some pressure off James Gunn, who's currently writing, directing, producing, and handling promo all at once. Apple would probably redefine his role so he can focus on story instead of everything at the same time. Don't get me wrong, Peacemaker Season 2 was fun, but it sometimes felt like a show written by someone juggling too much. If Apple takes over, they'd likely bring in a third DC Studios exec, or make Gunn choose between writing/directing and supervising. Since they value quality, they probably push him to address the mixed reactions to Peacemaker's ending. Not to punish him, but to encourage adjustments for future projects. Someone who could lose their job is Andy Muschietti as director of The Brave and the Bold. After the whole Flash fiasco, I can't see Apple keeping him in as director of another DC movie. I also don't think they want to have two live-action Batmans at the same time, because they're not trying to just pump out a bunch of movies and compete with themselves. So if you want Pattinson to join the DCU, that could happen with Apple in charge. They'd also push for more sci-fi. Apple wants to own that space, so we'd probably see Lantern Season 2 venture into the cosmos, maybe even adapting Blackest Night or Sinestro Core War. With Apple's unlimited budget, money won't be an issue.
Must be nice to have that kind of money.
But the most important thing is that they want to make real movies. Just look at F1 and Better Man, both solid movies that first hit theaters and only came to streaming much later. So theatrical releases for the DCU wouldn't be at risk, and the number of movies wouldn't drop either. Plus, Apple and Warner already teamed up for the release of F1, which crushed it in theaters and also did really well with physical sales. This would be the ideal setup, but there there are still two other contenders. Next up is Comcast, which is totally different from the previous two. This is the company that owns Universal, and aside from owning Warner's IP, they might also be looking to buy it to boost their streaming service, Peacock, which nobody pays for. The best thing about them is that they've got decades of experience making movies, and a ton of people who are passionate about creating solid entertainment for theaters, so the DCU would still be a big cinematic event. They also work with big-name directors, which could raise the DCU's profile, and maybe get Christopher Nolan to direct another superhero movie. But here's the downside for Gunn. Universal already has a bunch of high-level producers who could replace him, which would never happen with Netflix or Apple. I could see Comcast pushing Gunn into a creative-only role, and put one of their execs in charge, which could change the whole direction of the DCU. But that's not the worst part. These guys don't know how to handle franchises. They rebooted the Dark Universe on its second installment, and then just scrapped the whole thing. They also wrecked Bourne, and Fast and Furious went off the rails because they've got no idea what people want. They are great at making one-ups, but they don't like sequels, and if a movie doesn't do as well as expected, they just cancel everything. We don't even know if they're gonna make the last Fast and Furious movie, because Fast X didn't perform how they hoped. The DCU version of that would be, if Man of Tomorrow doesn't hit $1 billion, they'll scrap the whole universe.
We don't want that to happen.
And it gets way worse. Universal has had the movie rights to Hulk for the last 20 years, but they only made one film. And according to Mark Ruffalo, they don't want to do another one because of reasons. These people don't like superheroes. They'd be a terrible pick to take over Warner and DC, because they'll tear it all apart in a couple of years. If this merger happens, we might not see huge changes in 2026 or 2027, but the moment a project doesn't work out, they'd bury everything with the excuse that they can't afford to lose a cent. In the midterm, we'd be left with no DC universe and no DC movies, because when Universal kills a franchise, they don't bring it back for like 10 years. And now we've got to the fourth and most likely buyer, Paramount. They've already made several offers, and it looks like it's just a matter of time before Zaslav and the shareholders like the number they're seeing. Once again, we've got a studio that's all about the big screen, run by people who love making movies, so there's no need to worry about the DCU turning into a streaming-only franchise. If anything, we'll probably get more and better movies that stick around longer in theaters. Just look at how they kept Top Gun Maverick in theaters for 4 months instead of rushing it to digital. No more of that nonsense where they release Superman and throw it on streaming 30 days later, making people skip the theater. If you're into movies, Paramount is by far the best option.
Oh, I'm convinced.
These guys know how to treat creatives and respect their IPs. They don't kill off a franchise because of one poor box office performance. They're the ones who brought Mission Impossible back to life, and they finished making Final Reckoning, even though the previous movie didn't hit the numbers they were hoping for. Paramount would be willing to finish telling the DCU stories even if the numbers don't reach peak MCU levels, because they're patient and understand that treating both creators and audiences right is what really matters. But most importantly, they will leave Warner as it is. A Bloomberg article says that Paramount wants to keep Zaslav as co-CEO of the company if the merger goes through, and Gunn would stay in charge of DC Studios. Since Zaslav is the one who created the division and put Gunn and Safran in charge, it makes sense that everything will keep going like nothing happened, and we might not even notice the merger took place. But there is a tiny little problem. The WGA wants to block this merger because of all the layoffs it would cause, and to avoid another Disney-like monopoly. But they already tried to stop the Disney-Fox merger and the Amazon-MGM merger, and they failed both times. So odds are they won't be able to stop this one either. I know all monopolies are bad, but Paramount is the best option if we want everything to stay smooth and steady. If it were up to me, I'd lean more toward Apple, just to to keep up the quality, and because those guys love sci-fi as much as I do. But let me know in the comments who you think is the best candidate. Of course, we wouldn't even be talking about any of this if it wasn't for James Gunn saving the DC brand. If you wanna know how he did it, you gotta check out this video.